Hi everyone, I'm so excited to share my first recipe on my new YouTube channel. My channel is pretty much going to be dedicated to gluten-free recipes. Everything is going to be gluten-free, but a lot of the recipes are also going to be egg-free, dairy-free, and some of them will even be vegan. So the first one we're going to start with today is so simple. There are very few ingredients, very little cook time. I'm actually prepping on a super small surface here, so even if you're in an efficiency or a dorm or a really small apartment, you can totally make these crepes. That's what we're making today. Gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free crepes. They are wonderful, if I may say so. So I'm gonna get started. I'm using a single burner today, just it's part of my little demo set here, and a single pan. The pan is actually like the perfect size though. You want a small pan like this unless you have like one of those special crepe pans. Anything bigger and it just kind of gets tricky. Your batter can spread a little too much. It's one of those things where too much space is actually not a good thing. Okay, so let's get started. So I've got all of my ingredients pre-measured here. So I've got my cup of gluten-free flour. I like to use King Arthur measure for measure, but I've used a lot of Bob's Red Mill, the 1-for-1, and I know a lot of people make their own blends. This recipe doesn't need to rise or anything like that. Crepes are very thin. They just need to be soft and pliable. So I feel like almost any blend would work. If you make them and you have a hard time with your blend, feel free to comment. Or I'll have an email on here as well. Get in touch and I can help you troubleshoot a little bit. Then I have almond milk. I've also made this recipe with oat milk. Both work wonderfully. I'm sure you could use cow's milk if you're not dairy free, just plain regular whole milk or skim milk. It's really just the liquid. It just has to be a thin batter. Then back here I've got my sea salt and sugar. It's 1 tablespoon of sugar, which you could actually omit if you were doing a savory crepe or you're just on a low sugar or a diabetic diet. And then I've got my vanilla and my oil. So I'm gonna have the recipe included in the description at the bottom of this video, and I'm gonna try to post it on the video itself, so you might be seeing it right there now. But just for reference, it's 1 cup of gluten-free flour, 1.5 cups of whichever milk you choose, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. I use very fine sea salt, and then 2 tablespoons of a really neutral oil. So I used vegetable oil. I'm sure you could use canola oil. If you're going to use these crepes for something savory, you could even probably do a very light olive oil. Very forgiving recipe. So I'm just going to add my flour, and then it's just a preference. You really don't have to do anything special for this recipe. It's super, super easy. So if you're just getting into cooking, like I said, if you're in a dorm or your first apartment, something like that, this recipe is going to be your best friend. You can make these so easy. You don't have to know anything about all dry ingredients and then adding your wet ingredients. Honestly, dump it all into a bowl. You're good to go. So then I have a small hand mixer. If you have an electric mixer or if you just want to use a fork, if you are really starting out, that is also fine. This was given to me by my mother-in-law, and it is super, super handy when I cook and my kids are napping. This is honestly what I use because it's so quiet. So we're just going to mix this up. You don't want there to be any lumps. I know a lot of people, when they make pancakes and waffles, you're told not to overmix. Honestly, that mostly pertains to gluten-filled recipes that you can overmix and end up with like spongy, weird foods. But this is gluten-free, and with crepes, you really just need to make sure that there aren't any lumps. You need a really, really thin, really consistent pourable or scoopable batter. So it just takes a couple minutes here. Like I said, if you're using a hand mixer, I'm sure it would be much faster, but also you could probably dump it all into a blender, use a food processor, whatever makes your cooking easier, faster, more friendly for your kitchen. So All right, I think we're pretty much good there. And that was, again, just using my small hand mixer here. So you can imagine how fast that would be if you had an electric mixer. All right, I'm going to set this off to the side. Perfect. So then what I like to do is add a little bit of oil to my pan. I just use a very small amount, and honestly, if you trust your nonstick pans, you probably don't have to do this. I feel like mine are totally untrustworthy. I know that's a weird thing to say about a pan, but just don't really trust these guys. So then I use a paper towel and I just kind of move it around. You don't want to have like a pool of oil. You don't want to have any dry spots. You just want it to be pretty even. So I've got my pan heated pretty much to just a medium temperature here. So my favorite way to measure these out is actually an ice cream scoop or like a larger cookie dough scoop. You could pour it, if you have one of those measuring bowls that has a spout, you could pour it out if you're good at eyeing things up. I'm not particularly great at eyeing things up, so I just go right ahead and I use an ice cream scoop. I kind of overfill it a little bit. I pour it right in, and then you want to pick up your pan and just do this little, wrist motion. You can help it out if you are using a spoon or a scoop. Just make sure it's thin. The thing about crepes is that they should be very thin. You don't want the crepe to really be what stands out. You want your filling to be, the star of the show when you're eating and making crepes. So you want to let that cook probably for just about 2 to 3 minutes. They're pretty quick because they're so thin. Your temperature isn't a huge deal. You don't want it to be too hot because then they'll get dark spots, they'll burn, they won't be tender the way that you want a crepe to be. But you really don't need it to be so low that they're cooking all the way through because, like I said, crepes are they're really, really thin. Just move that a little bit. Cleaning up my workspace there. So, let's see here. All right, so this looks pretty much ready to flip. Like I said, it's probably about 2 to 3 minutes. You can usually tell because honestly the top pretty much looks cooked when you're done, but you just want to flip it over to make sure you don't have any of those doughy spots in case everything wasn't perfectly even and you did have a little bit of a pool somewhere. So you flip it over, you just give it another maybe 60 seconds. It doesn't really need more than a minute. And then my favorite thing to do with these, if you are doing a sweet crepe, which like I mentioned earlier, you can do savory. I actually use savory to make a gluten-free manicotti, which I'll have in a different video, but today we're focusing on sweet crepes. I love to put peanut butter and honey in mine. You can add some of those mini chocolate chips. That's a super fun snack or, a great breakfast. You can really just roll them up and kind of take them with you if you don't put too much filling in there. These are a great way to get kids to eat all sorts of different things. My kids love raspberries in them. They also love peanut butter in them. You can put a little bit of syrup on them and maybe a little bit of brown sugar or, powdered sugar. Really any way that you would normally eat your breakfast, you can enjoy a crepe. We also make like a sweet cream cheese filling, but that one is not dairy free. For my daughter who is dairy free, I use an oat milk with a confectioner sugar to make kind of a faux cream cheese filling. She seems to enjoy it, but she also just loves fruit, so we can just do fruit in her crepes. We're lucky that way. So, all right, there's my second crepe. These are so fast. Like I said, there's really no fuss with this recipe. They are super pliable, which is actually really hard to find in gluten-free foods, which I'm sure all of you out there that are gluten-free know. But these, they roll up so well. They fold, they flip, they're not going to fall apart. They are so versatile and so wonderful. I really, really recommend this recipe, especially if you're in a small kitchen or a spot where you have, a single burner type of setup. Like I said earlier, an efficiency, a dorm. This is one of those wow recipes that can make you feel right at home if you are, in one of those less than homey situations and you're just kind of making do. You can have friends over and really enjoy a recipe like this. Wow them making crepes on your single burner there. And then, like I said, after you flip them, it's just another minute. So If you guys are interested in seeing other recipes, maybe you have something specific in mind. Like I said, all of my recipes will be gluten-free. A lot of them will be dairy-free and egg-free, just like this one today. These are completely vegan, obviously dependent on your fillings. Let me know in the comments or shoot me an email if you have a recipe that you are dying to have. Maybe you've recently gone gluten-free or vegan and you're having a hard time converting something. Send that over and I'll do my best to incorporate it. I'll always at least respond and try to help you troubleshoot your recipe. But I would love to hear from you guys and love to hear from, other people with dietary restrictions and what you guys are eating and what you want me to come up with. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.